One of the things that I am blessed to have in my life is to be able to meet, speak with, talk with, have conversation with some of the greatest guests in the world. My guest today, Christian, and I'll introduce Christian in a moment. I was just sharing with him how my day has gone. And it has been quite a hectic day in terms of working with young people when school is out, the last day of school. And so the frenzy and being able to calm myself, even to have this conversation with Christian, I am ever so grateful that he was patient and he actually listened to me. Maybe that's what I needed, somebody to listen to. Somebody to listen to me. Listen, this is about this life with your host, Anne Marie. What we focus on, what this podcast is all about, is to take some of the things that challenge us in life, all those types of issues, and talk about them, bring them out in the open, because we may have found a way to get through it, get over it, to manage our lives around it. And then we can be a light to somebody else who's going through the same thing. So, Christian, hello.
Hey, Anne-Marie, how are you? So good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Christian de la Hotwa. Am I saying it correctly? How do I say your last name, Christian?
De la Huerta.
De la Huerta, de la Huerta. Well, thank you for
You
that
know?
pronunciation. So, welcome to About This Life. Thank you for indulging me. And it is what it is sometimes, you know? And I want to introduce you as a spiritual teacher. I also want to introduce you as an author, and I think that's fantabulous. One of the things that I'm learning about you is that you have more than one book. So I'm interested in getting into that in terms of how you came to that experience. But before we do that, where are you from? Where are you from with a name like De La Wait? Say it again for me.
De la Huerta. Think of the state Delaware and throw in a ta.
Okay,
Delaware.
De La Huerta. Delve into it and just get right into it. I know that you've written two books. We were having this conversation, and your first book was about coming out spiritually. That was the title.
Yes.
What was that centered around?
I've actually written three because there's one that just came out 2 weeks ago. So
Okay.
coming out spiritually, the premise of it is that it's really tragic, sad that so many people in the LGBTQ community struggle with spirituality. The reason for that is that we confuse it with religion, and no wonder, given the
Hmm.
treatment that we have received at the hands of most religions throughout history and even to this day. There's some that that judge and in some countries even persecute LGBTQ
Yes,
people.
most
But
definitely.
what's ironic about that, what's sad about it, is that before the patriarchal times and cultures and religions, people that we today call LGBTQ, um, because those names are really recent, um, were not only spiritually inclined, but were actually honored and respected and even revered for their spiritual roles of service and leadership that they played all over the world.
Absolutely. From my knowledge and awareness, which is not comprehensive at all, it's a limited perspective. There is or can be an internal struggle because of the way that the LGBTQ community is perceived, and an internal struggle spiritually in terms of the questions somebody might ask. Does God really love me? And where does God accept me? Have that, has that been, uh, have you experienced that in the writing of the book all those many years ago?
Oh my God, I experienced it in my life. Like my adolescence was one long depression. um, because there was a part of me that was very spiritually inclined, and you said that people do refer to me as a
Mhm.
spiritual teacher. In those days, I thought that I wanted to be a priest. That's what I knew. That's how you express that in the religion in which I was raised. And yet, I was told by that same religion that I was anathema in the eyes of God, that I was an abomination, that I was going to burn to hell for eternity.
Yes.
And I remember being a kid before I really knew about all this stuff. But I remember asking a priest once, "How long is eternity exactly?" And coming from,
Forever.
well, listen to this metaphor. You'll relate to it because you also come from an island. So he said, well, imagine you're going to go to the beach and you take a thimble with you and you start taking water out of the ocean with a thimble. That's eternity, which of
Oh
course
my goodness.
break me out.
I know. So for our audience who are wondering what I'm doing here as I'm leaning, I have a microphone over here, and so the plug has come out of the microphone, and I'm just trying to put it back in. But just from hearing what you just said, how did you overcome that? Because you mentioned going through adolescence, and there's a lot of teasing that can occur at that point, right? When
Mhm.
you're an adolescent, and also shaming, and also let me not tell anyone, let me keep this to myself. So how do
Totally.
you as a person resolve those type of issues, because there's somebody out there who's going through the same struggles?
Yeah, I didn't talk to anybody till I was at least 18. Just because of what you're talking about, the deep, dark secret within that I didn't even want to look at myself. And you know what shifted it for me was falling in love. Like I'd had sex
Mm,
before, but it was always kind of in the down low. It was hidden. It was suppressed. I would do whatever, and then I would feel like crap for about 2 weeks until the hormones came over, took
right,
over.
right.
But this time, like I'll never forget my first kiss, like real kiss, because it was after that moment, it was so beautiful that there wasn't a priest or a minister or a rabbi or a psychiatrist or anybody that could tell me that it was wrong. It's like I knew in the core of my being that it was beautiful and that it was a good thing. And how can love, however you express it, be wrong or sinful? It just didn't make any sense to me after that.
And so how did you resolve what you knew to be the truth about who you are and your identity? How did you resolve that with this is the family's perception of me, this is my friend's perception of me, or society's perception of me? How did you resolve that dichotomy?
Well, that's a beautiful and very insightful question. For a while, it was the immediate response was, I threw the baby out with a baptismal water. I wanted nothing to do that with anything that's magdav or religion or spirituality. I didn't know then that there was a difference between them. And so, went through my 20s, successful professionally, had my relationships, getting along with my family. I'd come out to my whole family at that point, and everybody, eventually accepted it. Um, and then when I started approaching 30, I began to question. I found myself reading
Mm.
into, what's the meaning of life? What's this all about? Which inevitably took me back to this spirituality. And I started looking eastward, like Buddhism and
Mhm.
Hinduism.
Mhm.
And then I realized, that spirituality is who we are. Like it is just as ludicrous to try to suppress or reject or run away from our sexuality, like I did and countless other people have, as it is to run from our spirituality. It's just who we are.
It is,
And
go ahead.
that I forget. I think it's Chardin whose words are that we are spirit having a physical experience.
Yes, we are spirit having a physical experience, and one can say we are an expression of God's love.
Yeah.
We are an expression of who God is,
Mm-hmm.
because that speaks to having the divine divinity within, and then divinity pouring out, and manifested based on our individual personalities.
Yeah.
So was that so then the book that you wrote, the thesis of that or the subject you covered, share a little bit with us in terms of the first book way back then.
Yeah, and but I want to piggyback off something you just said about the essence of the sacred being within. And I don't believe in abominations, but if I were to believe in an abomination, to me, the externalization of God is an
Hmm.
abomination, right? How much
Hmm.
further could we have placed the sacred? And where the hell is heaven anyway, right? So anything that we've considered sacred, we put it way, 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 way far away from us. So no wonder we treat our planet the way that we do. No wonder we treat our bodies
Hmm.
the way that we
Hmm.
do. Whereas what we're talking about is that the sacred is within. If God, like the traditions, the Western traditions claim, is omnipresent, then it means that it's here too, right? It's either omnipresent or it's not. And that includes, by the way, the genitals and the bedroom.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, people who will debate that, I think, um, in terms of, like I believe in Jesus Christ. So it's like when we say that the Holy Spirit lives in you, and, the epiphany is, okay, well, the Holy Spirit is inside of me. So I'm part of that by extension, by
Yeah,
inflection, right?
agreed. That's how I see it.
That's how I see it. We are in agreement.
Yeah. And so to
Okay.
answer your question now, what I did with the book, because it's a call for the LGBTQ community to reclaim that spiritual heritage that I was talking about earlier. So what I did is name and synthesize 10 spiritual archetypes that people that we
Mhm.
today call LGBTQ, fulfill. And so it's a way of giving people a way to relate to spirituality in different ways. So, for example, a mediator role. In many indigenous traditions, um, because we were thought to contain both the masculine and the feminine essence, which I think all humans do.
Mhm.
Uh, but we were the perfect mediators. So when there was strife in a couple, when there was strife between the men and the women in a tribe, we were the ones that mediated, that helped people work through their stuff and their differences. We're also mediated between this realm and the spiritual realms. So we knew
Mhm.
the songs and the rituals and the ceremonies when somebody passed. We knew we were the ones who helped facilitate those passings and those transitions.
What I love about that, because I heard you say 10 archetypes, and if anybody wants to know the other eight, they need to buy the book.
Yeah.
But what I love about that is the sense of purpose, the sense of
Yeah,
community, and also to negate the stereotype that people in the community don't have a spiritual side. Nothing can be
correct.
further from the truth. That's what I'm hearing
Correct.
from you.
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's bring that up to today now. So you said three books. I thought you had two books. Well, what's the book in between that you didn't mention that we can mention now?
The second book is called Awakening the Soul of Power. So, how do we step into power in a way that's not about hierarchy, control,
Mm.
fear, force, domination? How do we do it in a way that doesn't require that we push anybody down, put our knee to their neck in order for us to feel powerful? So,
But Christian,
mhm.
you're gonna have some people who say, I think I'm better than that person over there. I'm better qualified than that person over there. And maybe I have a higher position, a higher role than that person over there. Okay, I'm the boss. So what
Yeah.
I'm understanding is awakening challenges all of that concept. So give us a sample, give us a tasting of what you mean.
Yeah, and obviously in a corporate setting, in a job, there are times, I mean, there are established hierarchies, and there are times where you need to tell somebody, hey, go do that. Or if you're standing in front of a crowded auditorium and the fire alarms go off. It's not a time to say, hey, you beautiful, wonderful souls, how many of you think we should take that exit? Vote, raise your hand, please. How many of you use no, right? You just tell them, go, you go that way, you go that way, right? So there are times for the more hierarchical, what I call worldly power. But in interpersonal relationships, that gets us into trouble, right? Because if
Mhm.
I'm abusing power, then that's only going to generate resentment and passive aggressiveness and all the other ways that we get into power struggles. So the book is about how do we share power, right? How do if we're in a relationship, in a personal, whether it's friends or family or romantic, how do we get into a power sharing relationship so that it's equal and so that we have to work things out and we have to compromise, and it's power with rather than power over.
What do you do though? Because you have usually it's the people who have the power or are dominant, and they they are the least likely to want to grow in that area. It is the people who feel lorded over, the people who feel meek or this force is against them. They are usually the ones who are looking for solutions, who are looking for a way to fix this, versus the person who's domineering. They're like, okay, this works for me. So
Right.
how do you reach, yeah, how do you reach um either one of them? Is it
Yeah.
boundary setting where, you have to know when to walk away and when to stay? Like, what's the solution there?
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation about how long to stay after you try to work things out. The book is more for the second group, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
by far the majority of humans in the world. The ones who struggle with issues around power, the ones who often feel powerless, and they're so part of the way that we get into that is helping that person to own our power, right? Because we've been conditioned to believe that power is bad, right? With quotes like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And who wants to be corrupted, right? What good person wants to be corrupted? So we
Correct.
done it. So we rejected. And then also, how many abuses of power have we witnessed in our lifetimes? Countless. And so a good-hearted person doesn't want to be that way. We don't want to abuse power.
Mm-hmm.
So we rejected. But what they didn't tell us about that quote, that power corrupts, is that Lord Acton was speaking specifically about political power, not interpersonal power. And so when
Right.
you combine those two issues with the fact that we've also been conditioned to be afraid of our emotions, we are terrified of feeling, especially anger, right? So whenever even the possibility of conflict arises, we're out of there, and we
Mm-hmm.
sell out.
Mm-hmm.
We sell out on our power. We override our true feelings. We say yes when inside it's really not okay. Inside it's really no. But in order to appease and to not rock the boat, we sell out on our power, and that's not a good strategy because we walk away from those situations feeling like crap. It never feels good. And then if we continually are doing that, that turns into resentment, or it turns into depression. And so what the book is about is like how I compare worldly power or ego power, the way that the world relates to power, to soulful power, which is the kind of power that comes from within and doesn't need to prove anything to anybody, and it's not hierarchical. So think of a Gandhi or a Gandalf, if you're into the Lord of the Rings, in their
Mm-hmm.
simple monastic robes, their sandal feet. From looking at them, you'd never know, right, how much power they have until it's needed, and then
Right. Right.
get out of the way, right?
Right.
Like he brought the British Empire to its knees when it was at its highest point in terms of global influence. And he did that without landing a punch or shooting a single gun. That's power.
Yes.
And that's what
That's
we call
power.
that's power.
And I think about in Lord of the Rings, my is it Gandalf the Gray or Gandalf the White? And he said, "Thou shall not pass." He
Right.
staked, and he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"You're not getting past me."
Yeah, no, you don't mess with Gandalf.
In that context, and I think of others in terms of heroes like a Malcolm X, who had a lot
Dr.
of power,
King, Dr.
and
King, Nelson Mandela.
yes,
Nelson, that
yes,
they all embodied some, not so much Malcolm, he used more violent, like forceful power, but Dr. King was all about nonviolence. Nelson Mandela said that if he hadn't figured out a way to forgive his oppressors, the people who imprisoned him and kept him in there for
right,
decades, that he would still be in prison. Like, wow,
yes,
like that's
and
deep. That's
e-
incredible.
very deep. And the thing about Malcolm X, in terms of the study of him, because he was juxtaposed with King. So when you comparing them, it might seem that X was more violent, but in essence, he had his life before going to prison, but then after prison, his idea of protest was mainly in terms of organizing
Okay.
and mainly in terms of the community coming together. So that was perceived as the threat that people could coalesce. And so he had power in terms of the ability to bring people together as opposed to, okay, I'm going to go out and harm somebody. So,
Great. Thank you for,
yeah.
the
Uh,
fleshing out the nuances of that.
and it's interesting in terms of that nuance because who is it? The Black Panther. It wasn't until I was an adult that, because I've always grown up in the educational system, oh, the Black Panthers were bad and violent and they had guns and stuff. But the truth of the matter is they fed children. This is how we got the programs in around the country right now where kindergartners get fed breakfast. That started with that particular group. So it's so good to always have
Yeah.
all of the information available to us. So, Christian, in explaining your background, and I needed that because right before we came on, I used the word grounded with you. That helps me to ground myself in who you are because you went from awakening, okay, to your latest book, which is a conscious love. So it's kind of like a breath. You inhale and then you exhale. So you awaken to yourself, to your own inner power and who you are. And the exhale is a conscious love. Now, what are you doing in a
What a
conscious
beautiful way
love?
to what a
Huh?
beautiful way to connect those two. I love
Well,
that.
well, that's what I'm feeling. And I'm getting it from you. That's what I'm picking up from you. There's a conscious love. Like there's awakening and awareness of self in relation to others. And now you've taken it to another level in terms of love, how we can love ourselves and love one another. So take me on this journey with you.
It applies to all relationships, and so it's universal. But let's apply it to romantic relationships,
Hmm.
which is, I think, it's still the area where most of us struggle. And I've been doing this kind of transformational work with retreats and workshops and clients and coaching for going almost to 35 years. And I think by
Hmm.
far the area of romantic, intimate relationships is where most people struggle.
Okay,
People,
100%.
yeah. And so the connection you made is really good. It's really insightful again, because if we're approaching a relationship from a perspective of you are going to make me happy, forget it, hang it up.
Hmm.
There isn't
Hmm.
anyone out there who's going to make us happy, and it's not their job to. How unfair to put that responsibility on someone else. That's a big deal. Your job is to make me happy. Yikes.
You mean you're
Uh,
not gonna fix me? You're not gonna you're
right.
not gonna fill everything about me.
Right. So to me,
Yes.
that's what a conscious relationship is, right? So we have, like you were talking about before, we have done our inner work. We have gotten to the point that we know that only we are responsible for our own happiness. To whatever degree we're coming from a place of some degree of personal power with some degree of self-acceptance and self-love. And then we find a partner who's a match, who's going to mirror that for us. And together we can use that form of the relationship, the container, to speed up our own process of growth and relationship. Because to do a relationship consciously is the quickest way to shine a light on those blind spots that we're never going to see in ourselves, right? Like, it, to me, it reminds me of that joke about the enlightened master that had spent 30 years in a cave and finally decided to come out. So word gets out, and soon all the villagers are surrounding her. Master, master, what have you learned? She clears her throat, hasn't spoken in 30 years. My children, I have conquered anger. Oh, wow, she conquered anger. That's great. What else have you learned? The fuddle, 30 years to conquer anger. It's like, I've conquered anger. Yeah. What else have you learned? I've conquered anger. Right. Back to the cave. So a lot of this stuff is easy to do in a vacuum. In the push and pull, the day-to-day of a relationship, now we're talking mastery level stuff. How to maintain equanimity and center, sense of power here without pushing anybody else down, and navigating all the intricacies of relationship, stuff of mastery.
Okay, you said a lot. And I'm thinking about which thread I want to go to next, because the ability to stand 10 tones down, to stand in your own truth and know yourself, that's one level of understanding. And actually, that's one level of love. Would you agree? So then when you're describing being in relationship with someone else, especially in the area of romantic love, you've got to let go some beliefs. So what are some things that you, for example, you mentioned you have to let go the belief that another person is here to make you happy.
Right. True.
Yeah.
Right. So, and what we get clear about is what is negotiable and what's not negotiable. Right. So what beliefs are negotiable? And it takes some work. That's why none of this is easy. Right. Because we've been conditioned with so many beliefs that we have never even questioned, because it was the way our parents did them and their parents before them, and we just took it for granted. So in a conscious relationship, we got to be willing to do the work, dive within and ask the hard questions. And who am I? And what am I here for? And what do I believe? And why do I believe that? And what patterns? If I look at my relationships, where do I get triggered? And what are my patterns? What do I seem to attract? A certain kind of person or a certain kind of argument that keeps repeating itself, that sometimes feels like it's the same old boring movie, only with a different co-lead. Why is that? Yeah.
Why is that? And I'm wanting to ask you, so in your book, do you give us some clues? Do you give us the words, the language to use to ask those types of questions?
I do. And not only the language, but most of the chapters have power practices at the end where some of these questions are provided, right? So like spelled out, right? So you read this, let's apply it.
Okay. And I'm hearing, something that I'm familiar with is like the butterfly effect, but then you have another metaphor that you use. It has to do with a monkey.
Yeah.
So tell us about the monkey.
It's called the 100th monkey effect. And it turns out that the origin story is a myth, but I still believe. And so the origin story is that there was an archipelago, with different islands with the same kind of monkey, but they couldn't access each other. So in one island, a mother, of course, a female monkey, a mother figures out that if she washes a potato, makes a lot of sense. It's a lot easier to eat. So then, of course, the baby and her kids and the friends start noticing that, and they learn from her. After a certain critical mass is reached and enough monkeys on this island are washing the potatoes, suddenly, boom, 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 and all the other islands, all the monkeys start instantaneously doing the same thing. So that's kind of, I still believe in critical mass. It turns out the story wasn't quite like that, but I still believe that when enough of us get our crap together,
Hmm.
and start relating to ourselves, to each other, and to our home planet in a different way, I'm hoping that that's gonna bubble out, and then we might have a chance.
We might have a chance in terms of seeing the humanity in one another and
In terms
leading
of
with love.
survival, in terms of survival, like seeing the humanity in one another's is what might get us there. Right now, we're stuck in ego, how ego struggles individually, in power struggles collectively, cities and planets and countries were at war with each other. The planet will be fine. It might take millions of years,
Mhm.
but life will continue in some form. Maybe at the end of it is an enlightened cockroach planet. Consciousness will continue evolving. Whether we make it, right? That's what's up. We're just now beginning to witness what we have unleashed on the environment. And it all stems from what we're talking about, how we see ourselves, how we see each other, and how we relate to the planet.
There's a lot of, I want to say, Eastern philosophy that's pouring in, and I imagine it pours in because you also coach, you also work with others. The individual versus the collective. Comment on that for a little bit, because individualism is very much a Western concept, but then earlier when you were talking about Gandhi and so on and so forth, you were talking about Eastern. So expand on that a little bit more.
To me, it's a both and, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. It doesn't have to be this fierce individualism that we see in the West that ignores the community. And it's all about me, 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 and me over you. Or but it's not also the other extreme where it's all about the community, and you shoot down whoever's trying, the flower that's trying to grow above. We don't want that
Hmm.
either. To me, they're not mutually exclusive. We can find a way of shining, of expressing our unique human magnificence that we all have
Hmm.
in a way that doesn't put anybody else down. Right? So the same thing of going back to that power discussion. Can't we figure out a way to be who we are, and to have the kind of lives that we all long for? And there's enough for everybody. Um,
Yes.
and there, I mean, and that's a whole other long and very big conversation. But to me, that's one of those beliefs that need to be questioned. At least is that there's not enough.
I guess because so many people, so many of us have grown up with a scarcity
I
mindset that there's not
get it.
enough.
I get it.
And the secret is
I grew
that,
up that way. I'm one of
yeah,
9 kids. I grew up that way.
trying to get the food and the food on the table. And so it's just like, I've got to get something to eat. And so, you're scrabble for it, you're scrapping for it, trying to get there. So there's a little bit of East meets West and something, let me find a word, provocative that you said in terms of this new book. Again, Conscious Love, that you would like to, what did we say, empower women or help women? Uh, Go back to that for me. And I said,
Well, that's
okay,
that's
that's going to
from
be interesting from a male point of view.
well, absolutely, that's from the Power Book, because the Power Book is for everybody. We all struggle with
Okay.
issues
Okay.
around, but I dedicate that book particularly for women's empowerment, because
Hmm.
I believe that the empowerment of women is the single most important thing that needs to happen in the world. And this is not to idealize women, is not to put women up on a pedestal, is not to give women more crap to do to fix the mess that we're in. Um, it's because as a world, as a species, we have been running and still are so off balance where it comes to the masculine and the feminine energies that course through every one of us, because they course through the entire cosmos, the entire universe. So to me, it's like, how do we find that balance? And we don't want to go back to a matriarchal system. We don't want, to knock men and oppress men again. Of course not. We want balance. That's the only way that I see that we get out of this hole that we have dug ourselves into.
Interesting.
And
Go
to,
ahead.
and to paraphrase Einstein, you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness in which it was created. So when I look
Mm,
at the world that we're facing, and all the problems that we're facing, whether it's war, the environment, or hunger, or social justice, to me, it's all part of that fundamental expression that going back to what we were just saying, right? It has to shift. The only way we dig ourselves out of this collective hole is we gotta shift the way we see ourselves, the way we see each other, the way we see the planet. And it goes back to what you were talking about, our common humanity, and how the sacred resides and imbues everything in the cosmos.
absolutely. And we need only open our eyes and look. You've mentioned the planet and the environment a number of times, quite a few times. And even in that, there's a spiritual connection. Help us understand you, Christian, in terms of the perspective you bring in terms of our connection to nature, to the world, to the planet, not just one another, but to, humans in relationship to our environment. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. Like we were talking about before, we were taught to separate, right? Here I am, here's
Mhm.
the rest of the world. And we were also taught that humanity is the center of the universe. How arrogant is that?
Yes, yes.
Um, and so, I mean, there's a documentary that your viewers may have seen. It's called I Am. Um, and it's by Tom Shadyac, who directed all the Jim Carrey movies. But this is a
Okay.
documentary. So at one point, he is sitting at a table. There's a bowl of yogurt with
Mhm.
electrodes that are connected to this little thing that measures the activity of the electrical activity. There's no physical connection between him and the bowl of yogurt in front of him. And then they'll ask him questions that they know are going to be emotionally upsetting to him, like knowing that he recently got divorced. How's your marriage going? The
Mhm.
yogurt has an emotional response. They'll
Wow.
ask they'll ask him questions like, have you talked to your attorney or your CPA lately? The yogurt has an emotional response. So if we're connected to the bacteria in a bowl of yogurt, how can we not be connected to each other?
Wow. Wow. Whew. I think of that. I'm processing what I'm hearing, what I'm learning from you. And we can be connected to things that we use, that we eat, the food sources, and so on and so forth. I'm thinking about um, nature. Like a lot of times we say, well, we're not concerned about nature. Or a lot of times we say, that's someone else's problem. I think about that, for example, like our national parks. Not everybody takes care of them. Or you're walking down a city block and you see trash everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The impact on the psyche. So, what's the connection there in terms of taking care of yourself and taking care of your environment and the planet? You're walking down a city block and it's dirty. Talk to us about the connection.
We are part of nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think of nature outside of it, but we're a part of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Our DNA, like your DNA and mine is 99.999 something, 9 point something, identical.
Mm-hmm.
We Our DNA is 98.4 identical to chimps. And our DNA is 50% identical to bananas.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And we're we're all sharing this tiny little pebble of a home that is hurtling through space at 17,000 miles per hour. If we don't take care of it, there's no story to be told. And like I said before, the planet will take care of itself, even if it takes millions of years to find balance and for life to continue evolving. Whether we make it is what's up. And part of the problem is what we're talking about. We are so separate. We have this, we are disconnected
Disconnection.
ourselves with each other and with nature.
It's almost as if we don't take care of the planet, we are in essence not taking care of ourselves.
Exactly, exactly.
And so that's the mindset shift we want listeners to come to, that if you don't take care of your environment, it's equivalent to saying you don't take care of yourself. And the idea is to bring it back to love, because you're going to take care of that which you love. And if you could only find the love, okay, it's coming together for me now.
Well, and let's take it
Coming
to
together
another.
for everybody. Because if you can take care, you're going to take care of something that you love or someone that you love, you know? And if we can see that everything around us is nothing but love. Okay. So Christian,
Mhm.
how do you coach people? Because one of the things that you are is a coach, besides being an author. So you have the three books. How do you coach people? Do you coach men, women in particular? Um,
Everybody.
and what do you coach them? What new understandings do you help them on their journey?
To do exactly what we're talking about, right? To
Hmm.
change, to shift the perspective, the mindset of how we see ourselves, and all the limiting beliefs, all the misunderstandings that we took on from childhood, that we weren't good enough, that we weren't lovable, that we were too much of this, not enough of that, right? None of it is true. That's just stuff that either our parents or somebody said in a moment of overwhelm, or they just didn't know, right? But it
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
somebody said doesn't make it true, right? Wouldn't we say about every one of the 8 billion humans on this planet that just by virtue of being human, we are deserving of love, we're deserving of happiness, we're deserving of having a life that works, and of love and relationships that have a chance of working. So what makes us so special that we're the only ones in 8 billion who don't deserve it?
Hmm.
It doesn't make any sense. So using both the understanding of the mind that begins to shift how we see ourselves, how we treat each other, our relationship to power. So we begin to see the patterns of where are we giving away our power, where are we settling, where are we saying yes, but inside it's really no. It's a process of self-awareness that leads to self-love. And so once we come to that place of self-love, then everything changes. Our relationships change. We start attracting a different kind of person. We stop settling for jobs that are sucking the very life force out of us just for that, because we got to pay the bills, right? Once we increase our self-worth and how we treat ourselves and how what we deserve, then everything changes. Everything changes from that.
It's an interesting grounding because, traditionally you would say, okay, look, take for example, one of the things you said in terms of changing jobs. Okay, I'm going to look at the skill set, the resume, and so on and so forth. And what I hear you say is that it's even deeper than that. It's understanding your core and who you are. And that
Yes,
is what should be done to drive the type of jobs that you apply for.
yes.
So,
What
good
makes you come
stuff.
alive? What do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? This,
Yes.
as we both know, and everybody who's listening to this or watching this knows, goes by too fast.
Yes.
Let's take advantage of it. Let's not wake up, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now and realize that we have wasted our life or given ourselves away in because we didn't value ourselves. So we settled for relationships that weren't a match, or for jobs that were sucking the very life force out of us, and suddenly, whoops, there it is.
Yeah. And we want people to fly because, by the way, those years go by much quicker. Do you remember when you couldn't wait to be 18 when you were young and you couldn't wait to be 18? And then all of a sudden when you turn 18, all of a sudden these birthdays coming quite kind of fast, you know?
I know. And the older we get, the faster it goes.
The faster it goes, oh, definitely, it does that. So I've got a question to ask you as we begin to wrap up. Um, Rock, do you prefer rock or do you prefer roll? Rock.
Huh. It depends on what meaning we're giving to each.
Well,
Uh,
you give the meaning. Which genre of music do you love that you're passionate
I'm
about?
gonna go with rock in a different meaning. I'm gonna go with rock my world or rock your world.
Okay, well, thank you
All right.
for redefining that. Here's another one.
And if we're
Um,
gonna go with roll, I'm gonna go, with the ability to flow through life, to roll with
mhm.
things, and take anything personally, or get defensive, or react, or you like feel like you gotta struggle too hard or work too hard. Then no, I'd rather go with roll.
Right. Roll or a synonym for that would be like flow. Just let it go
Flow.
through
That's
you.
that's the word. That's the word. Thank you.
Like let it go through you. What are you passionate about? Let me give you the open-ended question. What are you passionate about?
Good question. What feeds me the most, what drives me the most, is knowing that what I do makes a real difference in real human lives. And to see the
Mhm.
effects of that, of seeing somebody who either read my book and will come to me in tears, like saying, like, my relationships have shifted, my whole life has shifted, or somebody who's done breath work with me, or come to one of my retreats, and I can see them changing in front of my eyes. There's nothing better.
I love your answer, but 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 what are you passionate about? And I'll give you an example. There are a lot of things that I do. I do this podcast. I have a day job. I have my own coaching. I have my own group, so on and so forth. But I love to dance, and that
Mm.
is me. What is Christian passionate about? What's your passion that brings joy or smile into you?
Well, I think the passion, I still go back to doing my purpose, mission level work.
Okay.
If we're
Okay.
talking about where do I feel most peaceful, most at home, most at ease, now we're going back to nature, right? At a beautiful
Yes.
beach or a beautiful mountain. That's where I feel like most at peace.
Amen. Amen. I wanted to draw that out of you because very often people will describe who we are, and it's a beautiful thing. It's not an either or, it's an and. It's
It's
an
an
and this I light up when this happens, you know? And I want our audience to understand that you can have that. Okay? So
absolutely
being in nature
nature
is,
or making love,
well, there you go.
right? Before,
Yes.
before I knew practices like meditation or breath work, the only time I was able to get
Mm-hmm.
out of bed was making love, right? That's where I
Mm-hmm.
became one with someone else, right? The ego boundaries that
Yes.
keep us separate suddenly fell by the wayside. And we find that place of connection, of deep connection, that, as I think, is what we're really longing for.
The connection, I agree with you. The connection and also to be held.
Yes.
And you mentioned a word before. Um, the word is home.
Yeah.
to feel at home, and the connection brings you home to another human being. Oh, we can talk about this for hours, but we won't.
Which, by the way, I get into. There's a whole section in Conscious Love that talks about spirituality and sexuality, sacred sexuality. Mhm.
Absolutely. So, definitely, we want our listeners to pick up your book. And we will have that in our show notes so that everyone can see the title of it as well and go ahead and order it. So I would like to say what a pleasure it is to have talked with you today. And I'm always hesitating because now I have a limiting belief in my own head. And let me say his name right. Let me say his name right. Christian de la Horta.
Christian's good enough.
That's close enough. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your grace. And I just want to thank you for being my guest today and about this life. I would like to say I have my own book coming out in a few months, and that is Dear Black Woman. Myself and several other women have come together for this co-authored book where we talk about how we communicate with our younger selves and all of the issues that rise up from those experiences. It's an amazing journey. This is Ia Marie, host of About This Life, where we change our lives one day at a time. God bless.